roll call, please.
Commissioner David. Commissioner Gossick-Seidman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bobby.
Present.
Mayor Zelniker.
Here.
Town Attorney Tercivia. Town Manager Labadie.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all those suffering with the flooding and the weather. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're up to additions, deletions, and approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda, Commissioners?
Mayor, I don't have any additions or deletions, but unfortunately, I have to leave a little early today at 3:40, so I'm not suggesting any changes to it, but if there's anything that anyone feels like we need to have me around for a vote, we can change it. But I thought the way the agenda is fine.
Okay, fine. And this is a voting meeting today. Okay, from now on, we only have voting meetings, which is wonderful. Town Clerk, the Civility Pledge.
Just for the record, is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
I move we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in
Say
favor?
aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, civility pledge. We will be respectful of one another even when we disagree. We will direct all comments to the issue. We will avoid personal attacks. Politeness costs so little, by Abraham Lincoln.
Thank you. And now public comments are now open. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to speak on non-agenda items only. All comments will be directed to the commission as a body through the presiding officer. Please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Come to the podium, clearly speak into the microphone, state your first and last name and address for the record. Fred?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Fred Rosen, Bramer Isle. Just a quick comment on the budget and the tax increase that we had. For the past couple of weeks, I've been getting different newspapers around, and I'm going through these with different towns, the proposed tax increase. And I look at the percentage from all these other towns. Needless to say, they're doing what they have to do instead of playing catch-up. And I look at the percentage of our increase this year, it's not much. It really is not much. What worries me is we dodged a bullet 2 weeks ago with the hurricane. Sooner or later, we're going to get it. And if we do get it, this town's not prepared financially. And I'm just asking the commissioners, or whoever is the commissioners next year, to consider more of an increase and an increase in the water rates as well. Let's get ahead of the game for once. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bowden?
My name is John Bowden, 3407 South Ocean. I'm here at the request of Robert Jacobs, who's asked me to ask 3 questions, which I am also interested in. Will there be more flags at different locations while we're waiting? What is the status of the FDOT approval project? And do we have the latest cost estimate that excludes some of the things that we were not going to include in the lighting project? Thank you.
Do you, Town Manager, do you want to answer that now or in your report?
Generally, I do it on the report unless the commission would like me to do it now.
Because he has to leave early, we'll wait for your report. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, but that will be answered. Okay, Doug Hillman, please.
Doug Hillman, Dalton Place. I wasn't going to report on it, but being that flags came up, I just thought I would mention. It's still early because we don't have all of our people back yet, but we're the ones that were experimenting with the flags at the beginning, and we're getting very good response on the flags. More and more people are starting to use them now. In fact, one group was walking across the street with 2 flags in their hands. Okay. But just one suggestion on the flags, if we do move forward with more, the holes that are provided in the stand, we need not more flags, but we need more holes. Because what happens is, when they go from west to east or east to west, most of the flags end up on one side. There's not enough holes for them. That's all. But people are getting used to them. They're enjoying using them, and they really do work. So far, so good. Experiment seems to be paying off. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, and we're going to move right along. Boards and committees, announcements, unless anyone else would like to make a comment? Dr. Greenwald? No? No, okay. Code Enforcement Board, 3 vacancies. 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending July 1, 2021, 1 vacancy for an unexpired term of August 1, 2021, and 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending May 28, 2022. Our Financial Advisory Board, unfortunately, we had a death, and we now have 2 vacancies. 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending April 30th, 2020, and 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending April 30th, 2021. Natural Resources Preservation Advisory Board, 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending April 30th, 2021. Anybody listening out there, if you're a full-time resident and you have the time, please, we do need people to fill these advisory boards. Thank you. Now, upcoming meetings and events. Town Commission regular meeting, October 3rd, 1:30. Planning Board meeting, October 10th, 2019, 9:30. Town Hall closed, October 14th, observance of Columbus Day. Financial Advisory Board quarterly meeting, October 24th, 2019, 9:30 a.m. Everyone is welcome to attend all of our advisory boards, and the Financial Advisory Board quarterly meeting might be of interest to some residents, so please try to come. Town Commission regular meeting, October 29th, 1:30 p.m. Board action report is the Planning Board. Would you like to read that, or do you want someone from the Planning Board?
We actually have Mr. Bowden here if he would like to give comments from that meeting.
Okay.
John Bowden, representing the Planning Board. Our Planning Board meeting, we had 3 items come up. We recommended that the approval of the house on 4403 on Intercoastal Drive. We also recommended approval of a dock at 3833 South Ocean Boulevard. And we recommended a extensive progress. We reviewed the report by the building department of the extended and extensive progress the building department has made, which was met our expectations and more. Have any questions?
Commissioners, anyone have any questions? No. Thank you, and Planning Board is doing a very good job. Thank you very much, and all of your board members. Ordinances and resolutions. Resolution number 19-026, fee schedule for the year 2019-2020. A resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, adopting the fiscal year 2019-2020 schedule of fees, which establishes reasonable fees for town services and other charges, updating the building and land development fees, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date. I refer this to the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So what you have before you is you have a markup and then a clean version of the fee schedule. There's been a few adjustments made. I'll hit the highlights on the fee schedule. The plan review charge has been added to the building department because we review all of this stuff for no cost, and if no one comes to get the permit, we have assumed that consultant cost without being able to recoup any charges. We also have the short-term rental, or what we call the vacation rental fees in there for those to register their properties, their inspections, and then any change of agent, and then any penalties found or discovered during the change, and a few water use rate modifications to the resolution that you approved based on the existing water sewer rate study. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
related to this.
And we have commission discussion on this item. Vice Mayor Bobby, any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Town managers. So I did notice there's a lot of changes in here. On the first page, the development approval applications, is that the plan review, or is the plan review under D on the third page, I guess, which is the $100?
The changes for plan review would be, I think it's subsection, I think it says D, or it's a slash through E on the markup, and that's plan review to be paid at the time of the outline based on the cost of your project. There is a plan review fee, and it's proportional to the cost of the construction project, so the plan review charge that we are, through our consultant, we're not holding that, because we do have, on many occasions, I'm thinking about this project, they drop off plans for review, we go through that, and they never come to get the permit, and yet we've paid the consultant, so we're kind of losing and not capturing our true costs as it relates to that. So the building official wanted to add that in. And then really, the other ones are relatively minor in nature. And then we have the short-term rentals.
For under J, additional fees, K, additional building fees, where did all these changes in amounts come from? Is that recommended by the
Building official, yeah, he inserted those.
Got it.
His
And,
biggest concern was regarding the plan review fees.
yeah, that one certainly makes sense, for sure. It's, you shouldn't spend time to review a plan and then it disappears, but there's a lot of little nickel and diming stuff going on here, like the plumbing inspection fees from $100 to $200, stuff like that. Did he provide any commentary of why he's recommending all of this? I mean,
No, I don't have that with me if he did, so I can't address that item.
okay. And then could you comment on the solid waste recycling services? Is that just there's an adjustment there? Is that a correction or?
Well, our rates go up 3% a year per the contract,
Okay,
and
so
then
that's
that
just part of
also,
that?
what's that?
That's just part of the contract?
Yeah, we have a 3-year adjustment per contract. What we've come to find out is we haven't adjusted our the waste rates in 3 years, so we're just taking this year and adding the 3%. We didn't do it the last 3 years, but we did it this year. My first time in my team's touching the fee schedule, so we're going per contract.
Got it. Okay. And we haven't gotten any presentation from the building department yet on why to make these changes or not, right? They just kind of
Correct.
sent them through to you and then.
Correct, we solicited everybody's changes and placed those in here, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gossett-Sideman?
Yes, thank you. I believe we started this process last year, and at that time, we did look into some other towns, other municipalities comparable to ours. The one I wonder is the short-term rentals or vacation rentals, if that really is enough of a fine, because this is an area that has been booming, as we've discussed, and is $50 really enough of a fine to, say, an Airbnb?
Yeah, that's on that one, we modeled off of a few communities, Pompano, Oakland Park. I think the staff used one other community that they looked at when coming up with these fees, and they're pretty consistent. And that's basically to re-inspect, so if they have some
Okay.
type of blighted condition, we've already done the full inspection, we would be following up with, did you fix your gutters that are dangling off the side of your property? We would go back out, and that's that cost. For that, there's an annual renewal fee. And basically what we're looking to do is it's more of a time and cost capture, time of processing, taking this in and our time out on site. And that really is what we used as the estimate, kind of going on what other communities are seeing or experiencing with vacation rentals.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the permits and the fees for them, is there some sort of a system that we're using now that we're becoming as efficient as we can, whereby a permit comes in, it might not be complete, it goes back to the resident or the contractor, and then it is resubmitted? Is there sort of a 1, 2, 3 step process where that it can be tracked, and if, say, they haven't come back to pick up plans, or they're negligent or just delinquent, forgot about it, they can come and we can call and remind them that it's sort of in a little purgatory there and we need to get it popped out? Is it?
Sure, I would
Because this
agree
has
with
been
you.
this has
Yeah.
been a concern among residents.
Yeah, so as we recall, Mr. Massey gave us a presentation on, the timeline and turnaround for plan review permits. And then it goes to Carol. Carol will make the call to say, hey, come pick up your letters. We'll email it to them. And then we don't have it written down as an administrative guideline, but there is a follow-up. We go back through their files every couple of weeks and say, okay, let's reach out to these folks that haven't come back by. Where are they? What's the status? And then I know that we follow the guidelines in the building code as to, how long they have to make corrections before their permit or their application is deemed terminated because of the timeline, so.
Okay, great. Maybe they could come up with some kind of a form that.
Sure.
Just a quick form, because residents might say, gee, I don't have my permit, I don't have my plans back, and they may not know that their builder or contractor has not worked in a timely manner. So it's not their fault, not our fault. So if we could just come up with some kind of a checklist.
Yep.
That would be helpful, I think. Otherwise, as long as these are in line with other municipalities, I think these are much better, and we're sort of years behind updating our fees and should be able to cover a lot of our costs of our building department. Thank you. Thanks a lot to the building department.
Commissioner David, any comments?
Yes, several, actually. I thought these fees were high. I don't understand the reasoning for doubling them when we mentioned at the budget meeting that we have an excess, that we're getting more fees in, not less. So to double them doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I'd like to know the justification for these fees. People have, in fact, been complaining that these seem awfully high. I'd like to know what percent, as far as there's talk about based on the cost of the project, and there is also something in here that says that in the value is based on what the building department determines. Well, I have an issue putting that in the hands of one person. I would like to see something that's consistent. I mean, among other things, if you're talking about the value, if I'm replacing a toilet with a Kohler and somebody else is replacing a toilet with a top-end Toto, it shouldn't be any more money because the toilet costs more. Putting it in and inspecting it is the same process. Also, I'd like to know who does review the plans. Is it our in-house person or do we send it out? If we send it out, how much are they charging us to review? If it's an in-house person, if our fees cover, we shouldn't be adding a ton of money into a fund that we don't need. And so I'm not prepared to vote on this at this point. I need a lot more information for backup.
Okay.
Okay, and now it's coming to me. Originally, we have been working on this for a very long time, for over a year. When we first put this together, the idea was to put something down to get something going, and then we can always review it. But the issues you brought up make sense, and if we need still more work, we'll have to do it until we get it right. But we have been working on this for many months and over a year, I would say, right? Yeah. Yeah, August last year. So it's a year and 1 month. Okay, I think we're getting there, but I don't think we're ready yet. I don't know about the other commissioners. Do we want to hold off on voting? Wait, Peggy?
Madam Mayor, would it be possible to actually research and publish maybe the comparable municipalities and what their rates are? Or have they already done that? Have our
I think we
personnel
did
already
that.
completed that?
So we could provide more information if more questions need to be answered. So that's the beauty of not having a workshop, that today when we conclude, a tabling motion would be appropriate, tabling it to a date certain for return, requesting additional information from the building official on these building fee increases. And the next available meeting would be the 3rd. We can return it on the 3rd and have that ready for you.
I have another question. When we talk about comparable towns and their fees, what are you considering comparable? I don't consider Delray and Boca comparable to us. They're completely different. Gulfstream and Ocean Ridge are a little more comparable, but we have far more condos. So I don't know that there is any place that is truly comparable. And I'm not sure that our fees need to necessarily be based off what somebody else's fees are, unless our fees are so outlandishly high that it makes an issue. If our fees are in the reasonable range, then people have no reason to lower the estimate of what it's going to cost. If we're making it high, then you're giving people more reason to play games with the value of the project being done. So I would like some feedback on that as well.
Vice Mayor, you have any more comments, or you want to make a motion?
I do, but I didn't know if you wanted to open it up to public comment first, or?
Yeah, we can, but if we're going to table it, that's a legal question. If we're going to table it, do we open it up then to the,
You could, if you'd like, before you table it,
Okay.
you could.
okay.
I would suggest.
Then we'll open it up to the
Public
public.
comments are always been a lot of benefit, but one thing I will say is I echo a lot of what Commissioner David just said. I understand we got to get our building department costs the same as other towns, and I certainly agree we need a fee for short-term rentals, but a lot of stuff in here is just little annoyances, and we're trying to get residents to apply for permits when they have the small jobs to replace the pool pump and stuff like that. Now you go double a bunch of fees, and it definitely doesn't cost that much more to go do those inspections. So on those little annoyance things, this needs to be improved.
Okay, if there's no further commission discussion, I will open this up to our audience. And it's 3 minutes to speak on this item only. Does anyone have anything to say? Mr. Hillman?
Doug Hillman, Dalton Place. I concur totally with what was just said. I like the term like or similar to. We certainly don't have to be the same as Boca or Ocean Ridge, and we are not the same. But if we take a gander at 5 or 6 communities, larger and smaller, and we kind of fall into a range, then that's like or similar to. We are unique, there's no question about it, because we are made up primarily of condos and some single-family homes. These nuisance fees, I'm right with you. Okay. I did take a quick look at it. My memory might be a little bit off, but I think it was something like $200 for a permit for a hot water tank that costs $600. I mean, that just didn't make sense to me at all. But 2.5% on a $600 thing also doesn't make sense. So I think we need to kind of rethink that a little bit. But the schedule of fees, let's just kind of take a look and see what other people are doing on these schedules. Again, like or similar to. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else from the audience? No? Okay. I do need a motion to table if this is what you want.
Madam Mayor, just one more point of information. I don't know if you read today's paper, but the Post, but Ann Gannon, the tax collector, has reached an agreement with Airbnb on more information on these short-term rentals. So she still has, I think, 2 lawsuits pending, but the one that had to do with Airbnb notifying her every time that there is a short-term rental, requiring the unit owners to, cooperate with that. They're still arguing over who pays the fee. Is it the unit owner directly to her, which is Airbnb's position, or she would prefer it be Airbnb collected from the unit owner? But either way, it should make our database, or the ability to get to a database, much more robust and more accurate.
Well, that's good information, and I'm sure down the road, we will need a separate ordinance just for this issue with the Airbnbs. There's no doubt about it in my mind. This was only to get something on the books, because we haven't had anything on the books. And the reason this came about, because some of the commissioners weren't here, is because our fees were extremely low. So it was time, after a certain period of time, you have to go up, but it doesn't mean you have to go up that amount. Okay, so no further comments from our group. We'll go to a motion. I need a motion.
I move we table this to
To when?
I guess, October 3rd meeting, if possible. If they can't get us the information by then the following meeting.
Second?
I'll second it. That's what I was going to suggest, actually, is table it until we have the information opposed to a date.
Well, which way do you want to word it?
Okay, let's table it till we have the information,
Information.
and then we can put it on the
Okay.
next available
Roll
meeting.
call?
And the information being, Commissioner David, you're saying other towns,
Well,
what their
other
schedules look like.
towns, why the doubling, what are our costs? And I agree, we need to recoup our costs, but I don't think we need to be pigs about it.
Okay.
Second that.
Okay, but we're on a roll call now.
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bobby.
Yes.
Commissioner Gossick Sideman,
Yes.
Mayor Zelniker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we go to item 10, the consent agenda. We don't have any. And actually, we won't have to have this on the agenda anymore because we're going to have voting meetings. So we could take that off of the, right?
Eventually, when we get comfortable, I'd like to talk about consent for minor things. We don't need to
Okay.
discuss everything if it's relatively
Okay.
simple, straightforward, not controversial. We should have a consent agenda that we feel comfortable on little stuff that we
So,
can
but
take
little
care of.
stuff still would
Couldn't
be
we just
voted
vote on it?
Yeah, you still would vote on it.
Without having
You could
consent,
vote.
if
But if we could
everything
group
is a
stuff
voting
and-
meeting?
I think we can vote on anything, so,
Just-
at every
Yeah,
meeting,
sure.
so. I would eliminate another line item, but that's up to you. You're the manager. Number 11, we're unfinished business, and I'm happy to say we don't have any. Okay. Now, we have new business. Discussion on amending the agreement for Brandano Displays, Inc. regarding holiday lights and decor. I refer this item to the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As we've known over time, we had a little bit of heartburn on some of the elements of the Brandano display contract. So I went back, met with Mr. Brandano, the owner of the company, and tried to find, is there some level of a solution to reducing the cost, getting rid of a couple of the items that really struck a nerve, if you will, and he came back with a couple options here. One that was more focused on the modification is to remove the life-size nativity and 9-foot dreidel. We were to own those things. He will assume those things back into his stock, if you will, even though he doesn't have a place for it, and then reduce our annual cost by $4,000. So that does, over the remaining term of the contract, save us a total of $12,000. It is some savings, but going beyond that, he did express a lot of concerns that he'd be losing a lot on the contract and was uncomfortable going any further. So, again, then the other option is always the option that's available to you in all of our contracts is to terminate and do something different. But the negotiated or possible options that Brandano offered us is to take out those two things that really didn't seem placed well within our environment here as far as the size of our property. He'll take those things back. He'll give us a cost reduction and the rest of the lighting display goes on. And I can answer any questions, concerns, things of that nature.
Okay, Commissioner Gossett Sideman?
Yes, thank you. If we went this route, would it be possible to somewhat dilute the amount of lights in one location being the front of Town Hall because it was a little overwhelming, maybe place more, maybe some on the library or the shrubs nearby or any other town-owned land? Because it was like one giant moonbeam and then dark everywhere else. It's like Vegas.
Yeah. I could reach back out to him and see if he could spread the love of the lights around to other buildings. I don't know. I haven't got to that specifics. I don't know what to respond with at his letter yet. But I don't know if that would come at an additional cost or if he would say, fine, we'll take some of the lights off the front of the building, move it over to the library or the Public Works building, kind of spread it around a bit. But I could broach that subject as well. I don't know as far as if he's going to do that for free to redesign the whole thing. He did make a lot of expressions that, there's a lot of cost with the lights and some of the very customized elements of our display that we have.
I understand. Right. Otherwise, I think this might be an effective route to tidy up a past error of size of items. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
I can't help but to laugh every time this comes up because it reminds me of, it's like a combination of the movie Christmas Vacation with all the lights and Spinal Tap when they make the little tiny miniature set for the guys to play the music on. And all I can think of every time is that big dreidel is like part of like the Spinal Tap set or whatever. So I apologize for laughing. I just can't help it. If this is what you recommend, it certainly makes sense to me. I think whatever we do has to be tasteful. And maybe if we do this and hopefully we can iterate further with him. I don't think we should cancel the contract because if we cancel the contract, we're going to owe him a lot of money and then we're going to be starting the whole thing all over again. I'm a big fan of making it less ostentatious. So if there's a way to do that and save some money, great. If there's a way to do that for the same cost, great.
Thank you. Commissioner David?
Okay. Both of these options, I would go with one, pay them the $18,000 and cut our losses and get somebody else who can more appropriately light the front of this building. To take $4,000 off for the next 3 years, which is $12,000, that's meaningless on a $100,000 contract. The fact that there was a 30-day option to out, he had to know there was a potential. We were going to walk away at some point. How much planning does it take to wrap a string of lights around a tree? What we had before was horrible. I really don't particularly want to own the nativity scene or the menorah, but if that's what it takes to get out of this contract, then I would do that, because I can't see that it would cost anywhere near what the remainder of that contract would cost to appropriately light the front of this building. And I don't think we need to light the town works. I don't think we can't put it on buildings that the town doesn't own, that's using town funds on private property, and we are not allowed to do that. And to be honest, his loss of money is his loss of money. That's his problem, not ours.
Town Manager, do you have any sort of estimate cost if we went with someone else? Commissioner David brings up a good question.
It depends. What do you want? And that's probably the hardest part of it. I know what we have is very elaborate. You can insert different adjectives I've heard around the community, differences of opinions. Some love it, some hate it. It's all over the board. That's not really my strength, is decoration. I'm sure if you wanted something quite simple, it would, as Commissioner Davis said, it would be significantly less. But I'm not really sure if we would be able to come to a consensus of what is the new look and feel of decorations that we want. Because it was well attended. So one way or the other, we did have a good attendance. I don't know if that just happened to be, we did have beautiful weather. It was my first time there, so everybody wanted to see me. We could do something less, I'm sure, and it would be significantly less in cost. Because if you take $4,000 off, you're looking at a $20,000 light display, when that includes the trees and everything year to year. That's them installing it, putting it up. It's a kind of a lease concept. We don't have to maintain it, pay for it, hold it, fix it, maintain it. It's all on them, so it does have some value there. I don't know if we start to close that gap much. If we're talking just a couple trees, wrap it up, and a 10-foot Christmas tree or a holiday tree out front, and we would have to find a new menorah somehow, or, because I don't know if we still have the old one that we had. I'm guessing there is something less, but then you take that 18, spread it out. It looks like we would be trying to target a $7,000 or $8,000 lighting display, which I guess, intuitively would say it seems like a lot. But what we had out here was quite elaborate, especially the tree. We had a 25-foot tree, custom ornaments that we picked out. I know that that strikes some uncomfortably, but we in good faith directed them to pick all of these things. So if we scaled it back, I just don't know what we would all want. If you guys quickly came to that, I could go find out, like say, oh, we only want this, this, and this. We could do something like that.
I would like to make a comment, because there's a history to some of this that maybe some of the new people don't know. I believe it was 2017, we had nothing in front of Town Hall. We just had a few yellow lights. The reason was, I was told, first of all, nobody on the commission knew that, okay? There's a lot of history here. So we didn't do anything other than a few yellow lights. The reason we didn't have the Christmas tree, I understand, because it fell apart. Correct me if I'm wrong. The
That's correct.
Christmas tree fell apart because I was here. I'm the oldest person here. And this is what happened. In 2017, the community was very upset because they felt it wasn't representative of our town. And we had people coming here saying, how come there was no lights? There was no nativity scene. All these years, there's been a nativity scene. So what happened was we had pictures and we discussed it. We didn't vote on it, but we did have pictures. The entire commission knew, and it was voted to proceed. Of course, no one realized how big everything would have been. We saw it, though, in the pictures. And the commission at that time felt people were very upset that there was no real holiday event celebration. Now, my take on it was we had the largest turnout ever at our holiday event, number one. Number two, we are also celebrating 70 years of Highland Beach. It's a combined celebration. I think Doug Hillman had a perfect solution. He said at the front of the properties by the signs, he had suggested we put some of those lights on the signs coming into our town and out of our town. I can also tell you, because I observed it, even my own building, we never used to put lights on. When other condominiums saw all those lights, I don't know if anyone noticed, there were a lot of lights. People were copying, emulating what the town hall was. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Quite frankly, all these years we've had a creche in front of the building. I only heard rave reviews. I don't know, maybe the people I talk to are different people. People, and I can tell you, the office will tell you, the clerk's office, there were people that stopped and they didn't even live here and they took pictures with the decorations. I'm telling you, they were. I mean, me, personally, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I just would hate to offend anybody. I'm not saying we have as large as we have. But I didn't realize at that time when we discussed it, and Peggy was there at the time, none of us realized how big these things were. I agree with that. Also, it's funny because I know I'm with the CERT group, and we have the fire department meetings for CERT. And people in the other firehouses were like, how come we don't have lights like this on our fire departments? And they always felt left out because it's part of our building. This should be the biggest problem of everyone. I just would really hate to, insult anybody or hurt anyone's feelings. The same thing goes with the trolley cars, with the parking. The people loved the trolley cars. The children loved the trolley cars. And it was a community event where a lot of people got together. They were constantly coming and going. So I think it was well over 250 people there because they stayed a little while and then they left. And the trolley cars were constantly running. So are we taking away the trolley cars too?
I don't think the trolley cars and the lights have anything to do with each other.
But it was part of the holiday celebration.
Well, but you could still have the trolley cars. And there has to be some happy medium
I agree.
between nothing and over the top. And I have to tell you, I know people who stopped and took pictures too because they were so horrified at what it was.
Yeah,
They
but
didn't
then
think
as many
anybody
people that were horrified, there were people that loved it. You know what? Everybody
if they didn't take a picture. So it wasn't that they were taking it because it was so wonderful.
Well, some were, families were there, and they would take
But
pictures
also,
with
think
the
about what you
crest.
just said. 250 people came, which is a nice amount of people. However, think about the fact that at that time of the year, we have roughly 8,000 people in this town. That isn't a very big percentage of people showing up.
I
Doesn't
agree.
mean you don't do something. It doesn't mean that, and I think a lot of people came because of the trolley cars, because they didn't have to worry about where to park. And yes, you do something. And, you know, I drove up and down this street at that time of year, and I looked and I saw most of the buildings here had beautiful lights wrapped around the palm trees. And they would have the lights going up the
Right.
fronds at the top. And we should do something in keeping with what the buildings do. You know, we can have a little more, and a creche is fine, but we don't need a life-size creche. And we don't need a 25-foot tree for $11,000 a year rental. That, to me, seems a little excessive. I mean, the whole $100,000 idea for holiday decorations just seemed way over the top for me.
Okay, Commissioner Seidman?
Yes, a couple other comments, if I could add them.
Sure.
This project was handled by the former vice mayor and Madam Mayor.
Yeah, well, not
And I
really.
wondered if we had some of the, on file, we had the bids or any other paperwork that we could compare with. I will say that where I live, the subdivision of Bellito, we voted last year to wrap the 5 royal palms at the entrance of Bellito. And it was a board decision. And for the first time, and the cost was relatively comparable to what the town paid for its extraordinary Christmas vacation package. So possibly this may not be as ridiculous a cost as it seems based on the amount of items we got. You know, Bellito also provided those lights, even our property association, even though that is technically town property. We elected to go forward with a 5-year contract. So possibly we could look at other contracts in addition to what you all bid out on last year. And I think if you have to choose a Christmas package, Christmas/Hanukkah/New Year's, anything else,
The holiday event, don't forget.
and that, the light up
70
the
years.
holidays, if you had to choose that to try to depict what it's going to look like on an 8.5 by
It
11
was.
piece of paper versus, you know, a 5-acre plot of land that the town has is really ridiculous. It's almost impossible to envision. So that what we see on a piece of paper and vote on, when you light it up, it's like, oh boy, there's a big difference. So I think we have to take that into account. Thank you.
I will tell you that we wrap in my development at least 5 trees and all across the front of the building, and it costs us roughly $3,600 a year. So I don't know where you were getting those numbers, but that, to me, that seems out of line when I know what I can get for under 5.
Okay, Vice Mayor, do you have any other comments? Otherwise, I'll open it up to the audience here.
I thought there were good suggestions that Commissioner Gossett-Seaman said, which is we should look at some of the other bids, and I agree it's expensive, and we just hiked everyone's taxes. Right? If you can save some money somewhere, save it.
We can save money in a lot of places, but, okay, that's up to the, all right. At this time, then, no further commission discussion. And we'll just, we'll listen to what our residents have to say. Anybody have any comments? Mr. Bowden?
John Bowden, 347 South Ocean Boulevard. You can't fix this contract. It's there, it's broken, you do the best you can with it, put it away and go forward with it. We can't fix it, just live with what you gotta do and make it happen.
Mr. Hillman?
Doug Hillman, Dalton Place. Question first, if I may. did you say that it's $18,000 to get out of the contract?
Pretty
Yes.
much, that's, yeah,
Yes.
$18,329 to get out of the contract.
So for that amount of money, we have no further obligation, period, and we can move on,
And we own the menorah and the nativity scene.
which we could donate or throw away. Okay. I think the subject obviously is a money subject, but I think a bigger question is, if we had no inventory, no contract, no nothing, what would we want our display to look like? Let's start from scratch. What do we want? If what we want is what Commissioner David described, something similar to what the buildings have, if, I know that our development, because I'm the president of the development also, spends slightly over 5,000, something between 5 and 6,000 for 2 front entrances. So it might cost us 7 or 8,000 to do our front. And it would be tastefully done, and it would be nice. If that's what we want, then you take that times, what do we have, 4 years left on this contract?
3.
3 years, so you take that times 3 plus $18,000, and that's what our cost is. A lot cheaper than continuing the current contract, if that's the look that we want. If the look is what the current contract gives us, less the savings of the $4,000, then that's what we do. I think it's pretty simple. If we want to do that, let's take a few of them away and put them on the north and south entrances to the town, then that's what we do. I don't know that we go on and on with all these other choices. We don't have a lot of other choices. To me, it's the optics first, and then it's the money second. And you know I'm really a fiscally responsible person, and usually to me it's money first. But I think in this case, it's the optics first, and then the money flows. My thinking is, and I know I'm going to run out of time in a second, I'd do away with the contract. I'd go out and get bids. I'd do a nice, simple presentation in the front of the building and do a nice Christmas opening. I would definitely bring in the trolleys. The people love the trolleys. They're not that costly. And I'd do a nice Christmas. And I think we would save significant money at the same time and have a great presentation. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more comments, I think we've discussed this enough. Just, we need someone to make some sort of motion.
Madam Mayor, could we table this also until we get that file
We're
of
running
bids?
out of time because believe
What
it
is
or
the-
not.
What is the timeline again?
If, under the contract, our first payment, Matt, is due what, like now? Like, yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, our first payment's now, so we should, boy, I hate to pressure commissioners, but I mean, we're really at the point, do we want to modify or get out? And then if you get out of the contract, then we'll look at something smaller. If we want to stay in the contract, we'll save 12,000 over the term, and try to ask them to spread it out. And Mr. Hellman pretty much summarized it. I mean, those are kind of what you got here as your options. I just don't, no matter what choice you make, we're not going to have 0. I think we got to be comfortable with that we'll light some trees, we'll put a Christmas tree in, we'll have a menorah in place. We will have those items. Those are traditionally what we've provided. We will provide those in some fashion, and it appears just at a different scale.
But we always had a crash. We did, and I think some people will be offended if we don't. Actually, from what I understand, I think long ago, and Peggy, you would know, I think the church donated the crash. Is that correct?
I don't know. I was
This is from long ago.
pretty
Yeah.
busy driving 3 kids all
Yeah,
over
okay,
creation.
She doesn't know.
Sorry.
Maybe John knows.
We had decor many, many years except for 2017.
2017, we did
And
nothing. If you
it
want to go
bottomed
back
out.
to doing nothing, do nothing.
It would be very helpful to have those other bids, then we could make a decision. So maybe
It's gonna
this
be-
is an exorbitant amount, maybe it's not. But if we have to cut and move on, I'm fine with that too.
I would have to let you know. I mean, you could do at a lower cost. What is selected here, even Pat will tell you, Pat Brandano, is elaborate. We
Right.
went to the nth degree to put everything nice, everything, specialized ornaments, oversized ornaments. double the density, double the lights, every pole, every sign. You have in here, if you will, pardon the Cadillac proposal here. So yes, everything else is going to be a little bit less, because you have everything in this. This covers that. You got a 9-foot dreidel. You've got a linebacker sitting in the Koresh. You've got a lot on.
Yeah, I know, but some people take this seriously.
I'm not trying to.
Yeah, no, I don't mean you, I'm
it's
talking about
levity
our
to
audience.
the situation, but
You know, it's,
the wise men are 6.5 feet tall. It costs money.
No, I understand that, and I'm not saying we
they're
should
bigger.
even have it.
But if we want to go in a different direction, we take out some of the extras, the extravagance of it, and we do what you're saying, lights, we'll hit the palms, we will get a tree. If we have to get our own tree, we'll order a tree, put it up ourselves, a pre-lit tree. It may not look anything like what you saw last year, but we'll have a tree decorations. It'll light up, it'll be LED, it'll match. Instead of 25, we could do 16. There's things we can do if you truly want to scale it back. And if that's the idea, I think we can capture some of the savings and put something out that's pretty nice. If we want to go in that direction.
But the people sitting here didn't remember that in 17 we had nothing. We went to nothing. I mean, if the town wants to go back and don't do anything, you could do that. We just had the lights, that was it. We had the lights and the tree and the menorah. The menorah that we used to have was a wooden stick with a cross on it, and they put the 8, you know, it was really.
I would suggest we'd probably do something a little bit nicer than that.
Than that.
I mean, I don't
But,
want
yeah, I
something
mean,
that's
it's okay,
duct
but I
taped
mean-
together or anything, but
Yeah. I think at this point we have to make a motion. Yeah.
we do. If we want to cancel the contract and
If you
I'll let
wanna
the attorney
cancel it or
jump
modify
in,
it.
we have timelines that we have to make the next payment, or we're, in a sense, not that we're concerned it appears of a breach of contract, but if we're, what's our payment date is? September 1st. Yeah, so we're late, we're
We're late
tardy
on
on
payment.
payment anyway. So I would think if we want to cancel the contract, now would be the time to cancel. If we want to modify the contract, you know, I think we're at that point, we got to make this decision, because I think if we come back, we're going to have more of the same conversation. Just know that if you decide to go in a different direction, cancel the contract, do something else, I will tell you it won't be in poor taste, it won't be nothing, it look like I'm out there on a Saturday on a ladder wrapping up trees. We will hire a professional firm to do something that's within our budget that remains. And if you want to use that as a secondary guideline to say, cancel the contract and spend no more than 10, 12, whatever that is, we will fit it to the budget versus that, and I will share that with you all, and if we needed a motion on the final layout, but
It's 9 days between this commission meeting and the next commission meeting on October 3rd. I'm happy to put this in a motion if people agree, but I think the suggestion of figuring out what previous bids were, so we can figure out, is it a $5,000 year savings or a much bigger year savings? Let's just get some information, get it by the next meeting, make a decision, and move on.
You're assuming there were other bids.
I don't know.
There may not have been.
good point.
There
There
were
There were 3.
There are 3.
bids. Well, then you have the course on those 3 bids. She's got it.
Do we have those now?
She doesn't have them here, but she should
I
have.
the
would have to
building?
pull them, but they were brought before commission in an agenda packet.
Yeah. You might have some other options, I'm not sure, because I'm looking at the contract, and it's got a 1-year total cost, and it's got a 4-year term. There's nothing that says you've got to cancel it now. You can cancel it January 2nd for next year and give yourselves time to go out for bid. You're still going to have a loss. It might be a little less than the 18,000. It might be 14,000 if you're going to do a proportion. You technically could even amend this contract to remove those 2 items, get the $4,000 reduction, and still cancel it. And, you know, you're still looking at a loss, but you're maybe not looking at rushing, because my guess, I don't know this, I'm not in the holiday tree business, is that going out looking now, you're probably paying premium, because you're in the
late.
last minute market trying to get something the last minute, and you might not save that much money. You might be better off just either letting this ride and thinking about canceling it January, February, and then gives you plenty of time to go out for bid again, or do the second option that Marshall presented, eliminate the nativity and the dreidel, reducing the cost by $4,000, I don't know how the other side's going to appreciate that when, if you do cancel it next year, they may still try to recoup that for, but I'm just thinking, I'm not seeing the sense of rushing into this because I'm not sure there's really going to be a great alternative out there. Whoever bid a year and a half ago, their bids have probably long expired. They may honor them, they may not. So just one more option to think about.
Well, but anything, they would have to reduce, even if we went with lowering $4,000 a year for the next 3 years, the amount that was there, they'd have to cut back on some of it because it just wasn't appropriate for our town. It looked like something from the Great Christmas Tree Light Fight, which is not congenial in this town. It's not what people do.
If I could,
Wait.
if you look at one of his conditions, and again, I haven't really brought our attorney to bear on negotiating. I kind of did this in good faith between Pat and I, not to say, I'm going to bring my attorney in to get the final pull on what we really owe and this and that. We could, if cost is, and he says there'll be no more financial considerations. He doesn't want to lose any more money on this contract that he agreed to, but he may be willing to, if the tree comes in sections, we could take a section of the tree down, drop it 4 feet. We could take off a third of the ornaments. We don't save any money, but we begin to scale it back a bit. But we're not going to be compensated or a contract reduction for it. And that's kind of what he's saying because of the amount of time involved.
One other thought, and again, I hate to say all these things in public because Mr. Brown can then watch all this, but another option would be that you make the contract permanent in his sense. And right now, he's at risk. Any time at 10 days' notice, you can cancel it. So he's got to realize, too, that he's playing and he may not have the full 4 years. So maybe if your negotiating strategy is, okay, we will guarantee we'll continue this contract for the term, but you have to make certain concessions and maybe give Marshall a chance between now and October 3rd to see what he can negotiate if you're willing to stick with this vendor. And I'm not sure as much the vendors, and I don't know the vendor at all, whether it's the vendor or the design. And if we're looking to ratchet down the design by a third or something like that, and he knows he's going to have 3 years to recoup, maybe. So just different options of trying to negotiate maybe other scenarios.
Okay, I'm going to take the liberty, another resident would like to say something? And then we'll have to wrap it up.
Fred Rosen, Bramer Isle. I agree 100% with Glenn. If I'm in the Christmas tree decorating business and a town comes to me October 1st, boy, am I going to nail you. And these guys, you got 90 days, less than 90 days. You actually have 60 days. You got to do it the day after Thanksgiving. Take the hit now and then end the contract in January, February, when you can get together and do something reasonable.
Okay, commissioners, anybody want to make any sort of motion?
I don't know what motion to make.
Well,
You want to make a suggestion?
So, sure.
How about a suggestion that you give Marshall, if he wants me to help, until October 3rd to come back and see what we can negotiate? And maybe we can get something a little bit. And I know you're not optimistic about that.
I'm not optimistic because he's hard to get a hold of because he is busy.
he's very busy
He's all
now.
around, he's a nationwide company, so he's
He
hard to
happens to
nail
be,
down. I don't want to know that by the 3rd I got to come back. I think we're probably close to the same. Can he tweak a little bit? Maybe.
Maybe just do away
Okay,
with the
then what I would suggest
And the,
is that we go with alternative 2, but have him spread out where the lights go, not do it all the way it was.
less.
We take off some of the Christmas tree ornaments so it doesn't look so over the top, put some of those lights at either end of town, and then we can decide in January if we want to go forward another year.
That sounds reasonable to me. I just don't want to offend anybody in the town. It's a touchy thing with Christmas decorations and Hanukkah
Listen,
decorations.
if you wanted to really get technical about it, putting up anything that has any religious significance, someone from other religions can come in and
Absolutely.
challenge it and make us have nothing. So even with a little bit, we're still crossing a kind of a line here.
Well, that's another issue.
Because Christianity and
Yeah,
Judaism are not the only religions out there.
You have Kwanzaa, and you have
And
different
we're not-
religions.
Representing any of the rest of them. So keep that in mind too when you're worried about not offending people. Anything you do these days offends people.
Okay. All right, Greg is going to have to go, so we do have to resolve this. Okay, 3:40, but it's almost, we have 45 minutes. Well, okay, any other comments, commissioners? Otherwise, we need a motion to do something.
Commissioner David, I think,
You made the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Please
I'll
repeat
second
it.
And it's seconded,
But
okay.
you can repeat it, but I will second it.
Yeah.
Okay, I will repeat. Let's go with alternative 2, where we reduce the cost by $4,000 with the stipulation that the quantity of lights and decorations in the front of the building are reduced. Some of the lights are put at either end of town, and that the ornaments on the tree are greatly reduced.
Okay, that sounds fair. We need a second.
Still the second, yes.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner David,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bobby,
Yes.
Commissioner Gossett Seidman,
Yes.
Mayor Zelniker,
Yes,
motion carries.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Okay. Okay, we have here approval of town commission meeting schedule for fiscal year 2019-2020. I refer this to the town manager.
Okay, thank you. So, now that we are all business all the time, we put a meeting schedule out, looking at the first and third, Tuesdays would be our meeting schedule. We do have to retain the first meeting in Tuesday at a minimum unless otherwise acted upon. But I tried to find a gap, and I really struggled to find a gap to provide some type of meeting relief for the commissioners during the summer vacation season, at least a couple of weeks. The reason being that, we think June, well, we have healthcare, the health insurance renewal, we have to have commission action, and that's usually a special meeting, and it has to be done several weeks before our July 1st renewal. There's an FAB meeting that precedes it, so maybe we can get lucky and hit it June 2nd if we get our renewal rates early enough, but sometimes those come late. And then in July, I think I took out the first meeting in July, the first Tuesday meeting in July. So you would have a little bit of a break from the 16th of June until the end of July. So that is where the break naturally is. I don't know if that's the best, but it seemed to be a break because at the end of July, we have to have the resolution for the maximum millage rate. And then in August, we start to get to our workshops or our special budget meetings, looking at all those budgets. Then we still have our regular business meetings, plus we have the Florida League of Cities. And then we get into September where we have to approve the budget. So the natural gap or improvement would be June, have that first meeting in June. Maybe you can move up the 16th depending on the renewal dates, and then you're not back until sometime in late July is probably where the natural break would be. That's kind of around the 4th of July holiday, which seems to be a good travel time. Probably the busiest, but it's a decent travel time and gives you a little bit of break to collect yourselves and get ready for moving forward. So we have a meeting schedule, and this is what we would follow. Open for any discussion, concerns, changes. Just let me know.
All right. As I understand it, we have to have a meeting on the first Tuesday, but the second meeting isn't essentially optional.
Correct. And I put it out there because we tend to have a lot of work. So I kept them on there, and I left them in with the default that we can cancel if agendas are light. But I sense looking forward, we got a lot still coming up. So I think we're going to be pushing our way through the fall and into early winter. and then we will get into election season.
No, the only one I was really thinking about was the December 17th.
Yeah, I guess the
December
only-
17th.
we could,
was-
that could be
You
moved
know,
off.
if we,
I'm sorry, I
oh, no,
forgot that.
it's not a problem because nothing
Okay.
is scheduled, so that's
Okay.
not the issue. It's just that, you know, people do very often want to travel over the holidays, and sometimes it'll be before Christmas Day.
That would be one we could remove, so then you'd have two natural breaks in your meeting cycle by taking the 17th off, yeah.
But,
But
you
we're
know-
going to need every bit of October, November, and that first one in December, yeah, and then, yeah, we could,
Yeah.
that's
But
an
nothing
option.
says that we have to take it off now. If we, when we get closer, if we feel that things can be juggled a little bit, so then we could do it later on. It doesn't have to, we don't have to deal with it specifically at this minute.
Correct. Yep.
Otherwise, I think this looks fine to me.
Commissioner Seidman?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Commissioner David. We're lucky that, as I look at this, Hanukkah falls 2 days before Christmas, which puts that week as, you might say, just an entire week of celebration. We even have Kwanzaa the day after Christmas. We won't have anyone honoring that date. So maybe the 17th is movable, and we could move it to the Thursday before, or whatever. I'm fine with that. Otherwise, it would be nice to have that break, and I guess if we have an emergent situation, we could always meet, call a meeting. And I will add that I've looked at other towns recently for a number of different reasons, and I've noticed that several of them are allowing a commission or a council person to phone in live at the meeting. So I just want to bring that up as something we could review down the road. It appears that it's fairly common both in here and in Michigan. I've got some contacts there in government, and just something that we can think about, especially if it's, say, an emergent situation. And I know you've ruled on that, Glenn, but just keep it in mind that we're moving forward with our technology, and maybe we can keep our meetings up with it. I do know just recently in Delray Beach, when the council convened to dismiss the town manager, one of the members was on vacation and was able to phone in live and participate. So there's one right up the street. But otherwise, you did a great job on this, and left some key dates open for us, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I think the schedule's right. I think we should give it a shot, and we can always amend it along the way.
Okay, I agree as well. So at this time, if anyone would like to make any comments on the dates? You don't see the dates in front of you. Okay. No one wants to make a comment? I will go for a roll call vote, please. Or a motion. First, we need the motion. Go ahead. A motion to
I move
accept.
we accept the dates as presented.
Second,
I second. Thank you.
roll call?
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Commissioner Gossick-Seidman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bobby,
Yes.
Mayor Zelniker.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
With that change, you notice on your agenda, there's an October 29th date that no longer exists. It's now, according to this schedule, just for all our viewers, wherever you may be in the world, that 29th meeting that was shown on your agenda is null and void now that you've approved this schedule.
Okay, I would also suggest maybe we should send out an email to people so that they're aware.
We'll get
That
it
I would
out,
do.
we'll get it out tomorrow. Teresa will get that out.
Yeah, but explaining it, that we have,
Our meeting schedule. Yep.
and not only that, that we only have voting meetings at this time. Okay, which makes sense.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
May I add one concern on? At present, we are required to provide, within reason, the agenda item requests 10 days in advance. But now having every 2 weeks a meeting, we might want to revise that to give a little more flexibility. Sometimes things really aren't able to be looked at or considered that far in advance. Just
Well,
something, a
yes.
thought to be considered.
But we can also have special meetings and put a special meeting
I
on.
know, I just mean for agenda
Yeah,
items, for
okay.
us to request them, and then it makes a better package for everyone
We
to
can
have
bring
as
that
much
resolution
available.
back if you would like to reconsider
If we could
that.
bring that back, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Are we all in agreement? Okay.
When we say bring that resolution back, what's that resolution?
There's an agenda establishment resolution that says you have to have agenda items to the clerk 10 days prior. I don't know if we've been adhering, all of us been adhering to that very well, myself included. So maybe we come back and strengthen our agenda control resolution, if you will, and then we all know where we're going to go comfortably moving forward.
Definitely.
Okay. Did we have the roll call on this? Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. Okay. Now, we're going to go to the legal opinion regarding the City of Delray Fire Rescue contract, and the town attorney will respond to some of the discussions that were had on the fire contract at this time.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. This was actually somewhat of a fun project because I was always a history buff, and as you can see, this is as much history lesson as it is legal opinion. One thing that kept coming through to me is that this is an issue that this town has wrestled with for almost 30 years, maybe longer than that, because my research only went back to 1990. And my sense is we probably always will, because it is such a big ticket item. And, it's life safety, it's critical. But I think the historical issue is that the price that's being paid is certainly reasonable when you compare it to what else is available out there. And the only real other option, and again, this isn't so much the legal part as the history part, is Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. And as, Matt Lala indicated earlier, if the town went that route, it would double your cost to $9.1 million for this year, because it'd be based on the millage rate. And as I pointed out in there was a point in time where many of the communities, particularly the wealthier communities with the higher valuations, were lobbying the county commission to go back to a system that it was more of a fee based on population. But they rejected that. They obviously got pressure from other communities, and they made the decision, and it's been in place now for 25 years or so, that it is based on the millage rate. And they have a countywide millage rate of about 3.5 mils, which again, as Matt said, is a little over $9 million for this community. Clearly, a community like Belle Glade or Pahokee, they're going to be paying a much lower amount. They would, my guess, I'm not a budget person, but I'm guessing they're paying $2, $3, or $4 million for a population that's probably double the size, but it's based on the valuation. And then when you look at the other communities, as you can see, back in the 1990s as well as 2015, there was this extensive survey by both commissions and staff at who else is available. Boca, in neither instance, was interested. Back in the 1990s, they said no, and then in 2015, they said no. Boynton was apparently not approached in the 90s, but they were approached recently, and they said very politely, we had great conversation with them, they're just too far away. They're near a station, and one of the practical issues is every time our rescue vehicle leaves the town to go to a hospital to bring one of our residents or whatever reason it's leaving, there's going to have to be another vehicle on the way, at least, because if a second person has a heart attack or a car accident, and Boynton was frankly just too far away, and their price would have been a little bit higher, primarily because of that. There was a look back again in the 90s about, do you start your own fire department? There was a look 3 years ago by the coastal communities, the 6 coastal communities, from Manalapan down through Gulfstream and Ocean Ridge and us in South Palm, as to do you create a coastal barrier island fire rescue? And there was a report. I actually never received the final report. I'm not sure if it's somewhere in the town archives, but at least the draft reports and the conversations that I remember from Highland Beach and those other communities is just too expensive. The startup costs were a lot. The ongoing costs were going to be more than what the towns were paying. And so even the idea of collaborating with the other departments, the other cities, was difficult. But I've also learned and I've been involved with fire rescue issues since the middle 1980s, is that it's redundancy. They're very big, and you can understand why. They want to have that second vehicle ready. They want to have that second hook and ladder available. And even though you have mutual aid agreements with other communities that will come in the event of those mass disasters on a day in and day out basis, that's what hurts. The other thing that made it difficult was, again, in the 90s, the county adopted a countywide standard of the number of firefighters you have to have, and I believe it's 3, and it used to be 2. So if every time the rig rolls, you had 2 firefighters, that's a certain cost. If you have to have 3, you've just increased your costs by a factor of, you're the math guy. Right, it's a big increase. So, and that caused several communities, I know Palm Springs, for example, is one of them, to have to give up their fire department because they couldn't afford to meet that increased staffing level. So that's the difficulty in a practical standpoint is, I don't want to say your only game in town, but pretty much Delray is your best option short of starting your own department. And every study's indicated that's very, very expensive, both starting up and ongoing. The legal issues were a little more straightforward. I gave the analogy last week about the town's, $350,000 funding limitation. And the commission in 1991, and one thing that was very interesting, there was no discussion that I found on that funding limitation until the meeting when a motion was made to put it on the agenda, and then the second reading. And that was it. The minutes were less than a paragraph each time, where fire issue consumed dozens and dozens of pages of discussion over many years. But that issue was just brought up, voted on, passed, and there's no real background to go to as to why and what the intent was. But in 93, the commission at the time and the town attorney at the time concluded that this type of a contract, and it was with Delray, and it was multi-year, and it was millions of dollars, did not violate that provision. And as I mentioned, it's kind of like going back and talking to Thomas Jefferson and saying, what was your intent in writing this paragraph in the Declaration of Independence? We luckily have the minutes that say what their understanding of their intent was, and that was that this type of an agreement did not violate the funding limitation. The second issue is whether it violates the general prohibition about or restriction on communities pledging tax revenue. And that's a much more complicated and nuanced issue. The easy one is when you float bonds and you go to referendum. And again, back then and now, the same analysis still holds. You're not pledging revenues, because if you ever read bond documents or anything like that, you are pledging. You're actually using the word, we are pledging our ad valorem revenues. There's no security interest that we're giving. It's not as if we're saying that we are mortgaging the building or a security interest in the vehicles. In fact, we're kind of a step removed. Delray has the contract for those vehicles. They're providing a service. In their service, they've got to provide firefighters and uniforms and oxygen and medications and vehicles and oil and gas and everything else. So it's part of the service you're buying. Not to go back to the holiday display, but kind of the same thing. That person is providing equipment, supplies, and human beings to do the services. So that's been the way that the courts, and mostly we rely on some attorney general opinions, because there's not a lot of court cases, because most of these get resolved. And I thought about, do I name people? But I actually did throw some of the names of these different attorneys over the years who have reviewed and approved this. For example, I didn't know that the first county contract in 1990 was reviewed and approved by Denise Burrill, now known as Denise Neiman, who's the county attorney and has been the county attorney for over 20 years. And we worked together way back in the 80s. And Denise is obviously a very bright and knowledgeable attorney in the local government world. And she signed off on this on behalf of the county. You had Tom Sliney, who was here for many years, very well-respected attorney in this field. He signed off on these. Susan Ruby was the city attorney in Delray for over 15 years. Susan approved these agreements. And then I think it was Noel Pfeffer, who was only at Delray for a little while, but he had a long career in local government in Broward. And then I signed off for the town. So I don't think all 5 or 6 of those attorneys, who collectively probably have over 100 years of practice in local government law, are all missing this issue. And so the short answer is, my last concluding paragraph, the 2016 fire rescue interlocal is lawful. And I hope the history would be helpful. And I wrote it partially, frankly, for the Financial Advisory Board, because I know that they've been directed to do this, so I thought this might help them, and for future generations to look back and try and compile what was literally 3 feet of documents and distill it down to the most important ones.
Okay, are you finished with your presentation? Okay. Now I'm going to have a commission discussion on what you've said. Commissioner David, any comments?
Yeah, after reading the various opinions and looking, I agree completely that this contract is legal. If you were to bring out to its logical conclusion the idea of having to put this before a referendum, you would have to have a referendum every single year on our fire rescue contract, which is certainly not a reasonable thing to do. We have to provide fire rescue. The question is, what's the best way for us to do that? And based on everything I've seen, it continues to be Delray Beach. They have an excellent reputation, they've got excellent qualifications, and so far no one has ever told me that they didn't show up when they were needed. So the idea that the trucks go to Delray on occasion, theirs come to us as well. It's a symbiotic relationship that seems to work. And sometimes if something works, you don't fix it if it's not broken. So I agree with what Glenn has said.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor?
I've never been a lawyer, and I've never got a chance to play a lawyer on TV. So I'm the least qualified to make a legal opinion on it, but I thank you for all your work on this. It was really detailed and took a while to read through. And I trust Commissioner David's assessment as well, because you're also a lawyer. So from a legal standpoint, seems to me like it's very much legal and valid.
Okay, and Vice Mayor Gossett-Seidman, now we have a section here where you're going to bring this up, so you want to combine this with your
Okay.
statements, or?
I swapped places with Greg. You called me Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry. Oh,
I'm
okay.
busy
Call that
enough.
foreshadowing.
You wanna swap places? I'm joking.
Commissioner Seidman.
Yes, I'll save mine for just some comments I have following with the report with some questions further to this subject.
So you want to do that separately?
Yeah, no, I'll
Okay.
just do it at the
Okay.
same time following.
Okay, because you have that as an item, so, okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, the only thing I had to add to this, and unfortunately, again, the people in the audience don't have this opinion. If anyone would like, it's public record, a copy of this opinion. It really goes into depth. And please ask our town clerk, and she will be happy to provide it after the meeting, or if anyone else wants it. Dr. Greenwald, would you like it? Sure. Give it, and John Bowden, give them all. Everybody sitting here should have it. You have to read it at home because it's very in-depth, but it's very interesting. And I was just going to read a couple of things just to go along with what Glenn said. And these are minutes from the opinions of Mayor, Commission, and the attorney who were involved in 1991 charter funding limitation provision are very persuasive in determining the intent of the 1991 charter funding limitation as it relates to the 1993 interlocal agreement with Delray Beach. Accordingly, these multi-year interlocal agreements are not in violation of the charter funding limitation, as each of these fire rescue interlocal agreements was a continuation and not an extension of the town's services. And you'll be reading all of this in your copies. The other thing I did find was in section 2.01, enumeration of powers. And that means it's express powers for safety and the welfare of residents in our town. The town of Highland Beach, by and through its town commission, shall have all governmental, corporate, and proprietary powers needed to enable it to conduct municipal government, perform municipal functions, and render municipal services, and may exercise any power for municipal purposes except when expressly prohibited by law. And they specifically have item 9, fire and rescue protection, to provide for emergency rescue and for the prevention and extinguishment of fires, and to organize and establish fire rescue departments. So I do agree with what Glenn said. If anyone would like a copy of these, I'm happy to give it to you as well. But we will discuss this further when Commissioner Seidman gives her viewpoints. And at this time, I will open this to the public. Okay, Mr. Rosen?
Okay, Fred Rosenbreimer again. Last week, we had an incident at Bramer Isle, the garage. We had a woman going around through the garage and heading up the up ramp. She cut it too short, her front wheel hit the curb, she was going too fast, the car flipped over and skidded to the end. The roof collapsed in the front, and needless to say, everybody heard the noise. One of our people at the pool called 911, and I have to tell you, within minutes, we had the police, we had the fire, we had the EMTs. Within minutes after, as soon as the police came in, assessed the situation, and did what they had to do to secure the area. The fire and the EMT removed the woman from the car. She had been surrounded by the airbags. They got her out and into the ambulance within minutes, and that ambulance left and took her to the hospital. The way that these guys perform, you couldn't ask, it was a dream. If you have to ask, if you have an emergency and you need your life saved, what took place here, I wouldn't want to take a chance with anybody else. And again, I'm bringing this up, I've done that many, many times. Don't mess with my life, okay? Everybody's questioning up here that contract and this and that. I've been hearing it for 6 months. The price we pay is reasonable. If every resident of Highland Beach ends up paying $50, $100 a year more, is it worth it? Do you guys want to be the first one to get chest pains when you got 2 people sick and you have to depend upon a new fire department and you wonder whether they're going to go in the South Gate, the North Gate, the Regency Gate? I don't want to take that chance. I'm asking you people to stop screwing with this contract and these people. Let's keep what we got with Delray. Let's stop making this go on and on and on. My life depends upon it, and your life depends upon it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public? Okay, Town Attorney, do we need any sort of vote on this, or would
No,
you
it was-
go on to the discussion on the City of Delray Fire Rescue Contract, Commissioner Gossett-Seidman? Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I started wondering about this last year when we were given a pretty big raise on the fire contract at the last minute. And then again this year. And last year, you know, Mayor Feldman was here, our current mayor, Rhoda, was here, and they worked up on this contract over the years, so I didn't really think much about it. But when it hit this year again, I emailed Marshall Labadie and I said, please provide me with a copy of the fire truck lease. I have the fire department budget. I do not understand Delray Beach hitting us at the last minute 2 FY fiscal years in a row with higher costs, and this was July 8th. So this has been bothering me as a commissioner and a resident since July 8th, since last year, really. And this is why I voted no on the mill rate, and I want to be clear on that. I felt that I was bringing this up in order to possibly renegotiate and revisit our contract. Because if you look at the numbers are very difficult to live with. I mean no ill will or harm against Delray Beach. I certainly think Delray Beach is a fantastic community. The commissioners are wonderful. I've known some of them for years. It's nothing to do with the people. It has to do with the paperwork. The big question remains. We have 5 years on this existing contract, and how do we pay for $38 million more in the next 5 years? $38 million. I mean, it makes the referendum pale in comparison. What happened if we would have had the referendum pass, and now $38 million is what we will be owing in the next 5 years to bring our total to 51 million if we continue at an 8% rate hike with compounded interest every year. I did the numbers myself one weekend about 3 weeks ago, and being as I'm not a math major, I came up with 46 million and 48 million. And I asked Marshall Labadie at the time to please crunch the numbers because, again, I'm not a math major. Sorry, Madam Mayor,
Sorry, go
did you
ahead.
have something?
No, go ahead.
Oh. So how do we handle that? Do we raise taxes or cut services or both in the next 5 years? When I did the numbers going forward, because we have a 10-year option, and again, these numbers might not be correct, we're looking at 7 million and change that we would be paying in the fiscal year of 2025. 2030, 5 years later, we're looking at 11 million for that year. And going forward, 2035, for that single year, fiscal year, we're looking at around 15 million and change for 1 year. Therefore, I thought something isn't quite right with the contract. And I really appreciated Glenn's historical background because I did not have that information until last night at 5:30. I did not have it last year, and I did not have it until last night. So that's really a very big help to me. Actually, I moved here the same year that the first contract was enacted. I moved here in 1990. Those numbers just seem quite exorbitant to me. This isn't about the people. We're talking $1,750 per resident in 5 years and $2,750 per resident in another 5 years. I ran off, and while it is true, as Commissioner David said, it is definitely true that no community is just like ours. I did a study, and there's extras for the people in the audience. I did a study of the nearby towns,
Linnell, hand it out to the
Sure.
people in the audience.
which
please.
I've been working on for about a month, and contacted each town. And the population numbers were tweaked by 2-3 people. Actually, we had a birth on our street last year, so we're already up another person in the town. And it just provides a bit of a comparison. Again, we are not identical to any town. I've been told by the chief that we're very close to Hillsborough Beach and their direct relationship with Deerfield Beach answering them. Manalapan and South Palm Beach are answered by the county, and the actual firehouse sits in Manalapan, so that's similar to our situation. And so when I requested 3-4 weeks ago that we look into this, it was simply to try to get a handle on a contract. Again, historically, 1990, with my neighbor Arlen Voris here, the contract was $886,000. By 93, it was $1,205,683. By 2002, it was $1,200,000 plus fees, which were not clear to me in the contract. Now to 2016, we're at 3.3 million and change, and you've got the documents from there. So I just felt like I couldn't sit back and do nothing about this. I thought I would bring it to the commission, which I did 3 weeks ago, and maybe we could tackle this issue. I do remember hearing and reading that the commission at the time of the original contract did get around the $350,000 for the fire rescue trucks by leasing them rather than purchasing them outright in order to avoid a referendum. And so that's okay. There's a little bit more here. So I wonder, have our services really increased that much in 29 years from $886,000 to, in the end of this contract, $7 million and change for just that year, for a total of $51 million for the 10 years. I have always been taught that the law is a gray area, not black and white, and there are ongoing decisions and precedents that you can look back in the past, and there are other opinions that may very well enter into it. Whereas our attorney Mr. Torcivia did a great job researching what happened in the past. Maybe there are other opinions which would assist us. But what is the intent of this contract? The law asks, what is the intent? What is the nature? And it just does not seem reasonable and sensible to me to say to the citizens, we're going to have to raise our taxes every year going forward in order to pay for our fire and rescue. I'm just thinking we might have some abilities to renegotiate. I don't think the contract is reasonable. I don't see dunning our residents $7 million and change in 5 more years. So whether or not it's lawful, we have to ask if it's reasonable, and what do we have to do? We don't want to close the post office or library. We don't want to cut services. Do we ask the town manager to enter into further discussions and the attorney and possibly commissions? Do we explore our own fire department again? I do know I reached out to Tequesta, which started their own firehouse, I think 2 years ago. Their current budget is $3.73 million with 1 station and 23 firefighters. I think we have 22 and a half. They're fairly comparable in size, but again, that's a different county. Palm Beach, the island of Palm Beach, they have 3 stations at the cost of $4.4 million per station. We already have our station built. We wouldn't need to build one as far as startup costs. I know we've already asked for an outside legal opinion. We've made that motion, and we've made the motion for the finance board to take up this. I'll be happy to provide any of my data that they need. But I think that these costs are extremely high per resident, and I think we need to continue to look into them. Do we do a hybrid department where we have our 2 trucks, and then if they're busy, we're able to pay Delray Beach a certain fee on an annual basis for backup? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of questions. There are also additional hidden charges, such as the true-ups, administrative fees. The pension keeps rising each year, I know. Bless you. And I do want to refer to just a couple of other opinions. This one was an AGO, which I posted online regarding St. Petersburg. It has to do with past commissions binding future commissions to this contract. That is a major question in addition to the $350,000. How valid is it to bind future commissions to a contract for 29 years and saying, well, we started with county and we just rolled it over and whited out county and inserted Delray Beach? I don't know. If you lease a Ford and you turn it in and lease a Chevy, they're 2 separate contracts. I didn't see that, but possibly that is the situation. In this precedent, it states, the city of St. Petersburg may enter into a contract that requires payments from non-ad valorem taxation beyond the end of the fiscal year without approval by referendum and subject to the appropriation of funds if such action is not prohibited by ordinance or charter provision. Obligations for a term in excess of 1 year and funded from ad valorem sources, however, are subject to approval by eligible voters. We don't have any other sources of revenue, hardly, but ad valorem taxes. There are 4 other legal opinions that utter a similar outcome, whereas we should have gone to referendum at some point. So I have a couple of questions for the attorney, if I could ask them. The reason I'm bringing this up now, I want to be clear, is because we have in our contract that if we were to provide the 3-year out clause, we would need to do so before October 1 of any given year, and October 1 is next week. And so if we were to consider it in any far-fetched decision that we don't want to go on paying $51 million by the end of the next 5 years in a total, that we would need to provide that information before October 1, or we're into another fiscal year of contract necessity. 1 second, please, and I will get out my questions for the attorney. Oh, I did the numbers also for the remaining amount of monies that are due. If we are continuing to increase by 5% each year, we will be owing in the next 5 years through 2020 fiscal year, $31,922,634. If we continue at an 8-year percentage increase each year, we will be needing to pay $35,412,555 for the next 5 years. And I don't know where else we would get these monies except to raise taxes. And so, give me 1 second. Okay, so for the attorney, if I could just ask Mr. Torcivia, because as Greg Bobby said, he's not an attorney. I just wonder why, and it's spelled out in the early contracts of 1990, 1993, why we don't get any credit for having a firehouse and maintaining it. I believe 2 weeks ago we had to pay for the replacement of AC units, which was costly. So we don't really have any credit back in the contract for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure historically why in 1993 there were, I remember reading those different minutes and even some news articles from back then that Palm Beach County Fire Rescue was asked that question, and their response was they just simply don't do that. Now, I'm not sure if over the years if that's changed, because I know they're in Manalapan now, and I'm not sure if they're renting Manalapan's space. But again, that's more of a business decision. I mean, one thing I'd like to kind of do is separate the legal issue from the business issue.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, legally, I'll give my opinion. I think these agreements are lawful, whether from a business standpoint. I know you've already referred it to the Financial Advisory Board to look at the business aspects of it, and there's always, worthwhile looking at, from a business standpoint, can you get a better deal?
Right, of course, I understand. And I do believe if this $350,000 cutoff had not been addressed 29 years ago, that in fact we may be in violation, as I thought, because I didn't have the 1990 or 1993 contracts, but we may have been in violation of our own charter. Is that right?
I don't want to speculate on that because, again, when I went back and looked, it was surprising how little information there was about the $350,000.
Okay.
Again, 2 meetings, motion each time, minutes just said approved. There was, projects, and there was no definition of what's projects, and extension of service, and there's no definition of extension of service. But again, 2 years, or a year and a half later, that commission, that attorney determined that this was a continuation of service, not an extension of service. So I think we need to respect the way they interpreted the language that they drafted and put out there. So I really can't go back and speculate as to what they meant other than what the minutes say they meant.
I understand. It just seems to me very, very unacceptable for our residents that we're continuing to work on a contract that's 29 years old. And basically no one is around to assist us. No one is around to redefine this. I don't see, I'm sure I'm wrong here because you say it is an acceptable legal situation, but it doesn't seem reasonable to me.
Well, the contract's not 29 years old. I mean, this contract's in 1990, when the city went with Palm Beach County, that was a 7-year contract, but they had an option to get out early because Palm Beach County was moving to that MSTU taxing, so they gave cities that option to opt out. This town opted out primarily from what I read because it was talking about a 75% increase, not just a 5% or an 8%, but 75%. So that's when back then they explored other cities. And the first contract, I think, was a 10-year contract from 93 till 2002. And then you had the 2002 contract that went till 2015. And the commission then opted not to renew that contract, just as the commission in 2002 opted not to renew it, but to negotiate a new one. And you'll see there are slight differences hopefully we get better and better every time you do this, but certainly the 2002 contract I thought was more equitable and fairer to the town than the 93 one. I shouldn't say more equitable, fair, it would certainly spelled out more. It defined more operating costs, personnel costs, there were more definitions. And in 2015, I think we even took that a step further and spelled out a little bit more of what's expected. So, different commissions opted to have the 93, I would call that the second contract. The county was the first contract in 90. 93 was your second outside agency fire contract. 2002, a third one, and then 2015. So this is the fourth separate and distinct time that a commission has voted to enter into an agreement.
I understand. It just appears to be that we keep building on the same basic premises, which now are putting us in this unheard of range for costs. I would like to address it. Here's a big question. The interlocal agreements, I understand they're protected in a different venue under the law. Does it really include changing vendors from the county to Delray? Do they recognize that as a continuation in almost all instances?
Again, interlocal agreement is different, and I'm going to mix apples and oranges. Our charter provision is one thing. Entering into an interlocal agreement on any topic is much different. And, what I found interesting, just being a lawyer nerd on this, is you had the same Attorney General in 1983, I think it was, giving an opinion that a certain fire district could not provide services outside its jurisdiction. And in 1984, they reversed that and said you can provide services outside your boundaries because you were doing it with another governmental entity through the Interlocal Government Act, which certainly implies that there's even more powers under that act because the legislature specifically said, local governments, you can contract for these services, and you're given even broader shoulders and a little bit more authority. I mean, that when I read those two opinions back to back, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I always knew interlocal agreements had a separate and distinct standing in the legal world, but that opinion for me put it into a little bit of a sharper image that, okay, because they went through the interlocal and you're contracting with another government, even though this fire district's charter said they can't operate outside their boundaries, because they did an interlocal agreement with the county, they were allowed to. That's an eye-opener in the legal world. So that even bolsters the idea that, yes, this type of an agreement is certainly lawful. And, what I didn't mention in the opinion is how commonplace these kind of contracts are. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, that's the business decision. But in the legal world, virtually every city and town has long-term contracts for a variety of services. I mean, you enter into solid waste contracts that are typically 7 years long. The Solid Waste Authority goes out for bids, they enter into a contract with the hauler, that's 7 years and extensions. So the idea of long-term agreements is very commonplace in the local government world. I think Commissioner David made the point, you can't go for referendum every year
I understand.
to provide fire services.
Well, that leaves us with the numbers. So if it is lawful, that's terrific. I'm glad we're lawful. I don't know what we're going to do with the numbers. I don't. I would like to present it to the commission. I know Greg's got his calculator out, and he's the numbers guy. I'm just concerned. We're trying to correct very many different things in the town, and this one was just an eye-opener. When I started looking at it back in July, it was just a big eye-opener. I thought we were on the way of really correcting so many different areas, and I don't see how we can not raise taxes every year for the next 5 years. I don't see an out to that. And I'm wondering if our attorney and our town manager think that we can, in some way, get back to some negotiations. If we should give Delray Beach a 3-year, let them know before October 1 that we are looking at ending the contract, which is the earliest time we could, or if we don't by October 1, we're into another year of contract. I just think that everyone needs to have the numbers and everyone needs to be aware, and I'm tired of having things sneak up on us.
Well, I'd want to tread lightly because I'm not the finance person, as I indicated.
No, I know, and I'm not. I'm just
right.
asking the questions, and I'm presenting them so that we can all seek some guidance.
And I'm looking forward to attending, I think, the next Financial Advisory Board. I've been invited to attend to kind of deliver the same report because I
Okay.
think they're going to dive into the numbers.
I mean, I don't see how we've gone, again, nothing having to do with the people and the city itself. It baffles me that we've gone from 886,000 to 51 million for 10 years over this time period. It just seems, there seems to be no end. And if we do a 10-year renewal, we're up to astronomical amounts of money. 71 million, something like that. So that's what I have to say. My questions stand. I don't have any answers, but I think we need to get on this. And I would like to open it to discussion from the other commissioners at this point.
Okay, Commissioner David?
Okay. I'm not a finance person, and I have absolutely no idea where you got these numbers from. 38 million and 51 million and
From Marshall Lind, our finance guy.
yes, but you're talking apples and oranges. We're not going to be spending 38 million a year. And when you talk about 800,000, what was the whole budget at that point in time? So maybe that needs to be looked at as well. You can't just take it by itself. You've thrown out lots of questions, but you haven't given any answers at all. If we don't do this, where do we go? How do we find it for less? We can go to Palm Beach County, but that's going to cost us double, not less. And where else do we go? Everyone who's done any kind of research into starting our own, it's not the cost of the building that's the major cost in starting a fire department. It's the personnel, and it's the training, and it's funding to supply everything that the building needs, all the equipment. So I guess I'm just not really sure. I understand that it's a lot of money, but providing fire rescue and providing police, those are expensive items. And I don't want to go down in quality. Right now, we've got an A+ rated system. If we go to Palm Beach County, they don't have the same rating as Delray Beach does. Plus, if we need backup support, they're further away. They're not down the block. There's another fire station on Linton. There's another one on Atlantic. And if both of those are in use, they have an agreement with Boca. There's another one on Spanish River. But if we go with the county, they don't have those kinds of facilities to come in. If what you're doing is you're just adding 5% a year to the cost, if we take it without adding the 5%, you're still talking, even if it remains exactly the same for the next 5 years at $4 million, that's $20 million anyway. There's no way it's going to be less than $20 million. According to the fire chief this year when he spoke to us, he said one of the reasons for the increases is they had a lot of money that had to go into pension plans. And our contract provides that we pay a percentage. We are paying for the cost of having 22.5 people, and that we pay a percentage based on their actual costs. So it isn't open-ended in that Delray isn't going to just let their costs go crazy because we're only paying a small portion of that. They're paying the rest of it. And they're not going to allow that to happen to themselves. A true-up doesn't mean that's costing us extra. It may, but it also may be that they have to give back to us, because if their projected costs are not what their actual costs are, then we get money back, or we get a credit towards the next year. I don't know how they would actually work it, but because we are required to pay actual costs on a lot of our items, as opposed to the administrative fee. If I manufacture widgets and I'm selling it to somebody, I'm not selling it to them at my exact cost. I need to make money to cover my other costs, not just the cost of producing that widget, but the cost of maintaining my building, which I'm not charging them for. No one does something without making a little something there. That's just how business works. So, and I think because we did ask the FAB to look into this, this whole discussion is premature until the FAB comes back with some numbers for us, that they've done their research.
Can I address her concern, her questions?
1 second, yeah, she's still talking.
Yeah, so I want to wait until our financial advisory board tells us that, okay, this is not good. And as far as giving them notice by October 1st, that's next week. That's not reasonable. And as far as your point about a commission not doing something that will bind future commissions, that means you can't ever do anything, because every single year there's an election, and every single year there's the possibility of having a new makeup of your commission. That doesn't make any sense either logically. You can't do that. You're always bound by what a previous commission has done. Sometimes you can change it, sometimes you can't, but there's always going to be a carryover. That's just the nature of government. Yeah, I want to wait for the FAB to come back, because I want to see real numbers, not something that I don't know where they came from.
I would like all of us to talk, and then you can answer all of us at one time. Is that okay?
Well,
Or you
I'd
wanna
just
do-
like to address
Okay,
everyone, so she
You want to
has-
do each person?
My
Okay.
numbers are real numbers. They're from Matt and Marshall. The $35,412,555 is the amount of the next 5 years with an 8% cost hike each year compounded. And the $31,922,634 also from Matt and Marshall, which would be the same but at a rate of 5% increase each year for the next 5 years. I didn't make up any numbers. As I said, I went to them because I was doing the math at home on the weekend on my calculator, and I said, I think they can do better. And actually, this was sent to us last night at 5:30. This 10-year cost plan, which I'll be glad to copy for anyone, but I just got mine last night. These are Marshall and Matt's numbers. I didn't make up any of them. And as for the binding future commissions, there are all of these legal opinions, which I'm happy to copy you on.
Okay.
So I'm just saying,
Greg has to
I tried to
leave,
do-
so if you want to vote on
Sure.
something, I have to move this along.
My point is,
Okay.
if we wanted to try to get out of any of this or give them notice, we have until next week, just to give them a 3-year notice. We could negotiate in the next 2 months, 1 year, whatever. We have 3 years to renegotiate.
Okay,
If we
I'm
don't,
sorry
we're going to
to
be into it
it's
for
just he
another
has to
year.
leave, honey. We
That's
can't-
fine. Okay.
We can't vote on anything if he leaves. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I loved your research. That was a great little sheet you handed out. I hate to say this, I think there's one small error on the bottom. 45 million divided by 111,000 is $400. Thank you. But I love the sheet. I didn't even want to mention that because it's,
That's how they bill people. It's just a.
oh, okay, they don't even
Yes,
charge
sir.
them the 12
No.
months. Oh, that's great.
But I put it up there, I should have
Then
explained.
no
it.
errors.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thinking the numbers for a standpoint, whenever I think numbers in the same year opposed to cumulative. Here's how I think about it. So we know the contract's going up 5% a year. 5% a year on 4.22 million is $212,000 a year, so that's about what's gone up. If our property prices, I actually just calculated this now, if our property prices go up 5% a year, we hold the millage rate flat, it's an extra 500 grandish, 475, 500 grand. So you can think your break even almost of fire contract going up 5%, property prices have to go up 2.5% to cover it. That's how I kind of think about it. I try not to do too much cumulative math, because then you've got to do cumulative math on the other side of how much tax revenue we're taking in. And then the numbers get to be really big and it's hard to figure out. But for anyone trying to follow along at home, 5% compounded over 10 years is a factor of 1.63. Take whatever number you start with, multiply it times 1.63, that's what it's at the end. 8% compounded over 10 years is 2.16 times, so it means like in 10 years, if this went up 8% every year, it goes from 4.224 million to 9.12 million a year. But again, our revenues are hopefully going to be going up with it as well. So as I understand it, they can't make a profit on us. That's why we have the true up anyway, right? So they're passing along the costs. Our labor, their contract's going up a lot. Our labor's going up pretty similar. I've said this a bunch of times. Man, labor is tough for new municipalities because you have this retirement cost, and it's massive, and it's growing. And that's where a lot of these costs are coming from, whether we have our own department, outsource to someone else. It's the labor costs are tough. At some point, we'll probably get to be so high on a contract, and particularly if you have a big downturn in property, we might be forced into some sort of alternative. But that alternative could be renegotiating a contract. That alternative could be finding someone else. Who knows what it is? I don't think we're really there yet, though. We have a unique sense of place where we have a lot of big high rises. So some of those other small towns, it's valid to say there's a comparison, but we might need a different level of service and different level of trucks and different level of everything else to handle our unique sense of place. And I've said this 100 times, so I'm sorry to repeat it, but anytime you go to negotiation, you got to figure out who you are. Are you the price taker or are you the price maker? And in this case, we are the price taker. We are not the price maker. So negotiations sound great, but we got to remember how this has gone in the past. And Delray's pretty smart. And they said, hey, you know what? We know the next price behind us is $6, $7, or $8, $9 million, whatever it might be now. So there's not a lot of negotiation that should be expected. And just using the inversion technique and trying to think about I'm the other person on the other side of the table. If I'm Delray, the one thing I want to make sure I don't do is I don't want to promise some sort of cap or something like that, where then I have to go back to my residents and say, yeah, you know, our taxes are going up because, you know, we promised Highland Beach a 4% cap on their contract. Our costs were 8%. So all of you Delray residents, you're making up the difference. That's going to go over about as good as a screen door in a submarine. It's going to be a problem. So I don't think they're ever going to allow that. We have to understand that and respect that. This is probably one of the biggest topics and biggest sensitivities and biggest costs of this town. So any course correction we try to make has to be really well thought out, really well thought out. I think it'd be a bad idea to cancel any contracts now. It hasn't been evaluated enough. I think there's plenty of time to do something down the road. I think we got to really think about what our alternatives are if we were ever thinking of doing anything. And I actually would like to hear what the Financial Advisory Board has to say on this. And they're a bunch of smart folks.
Okay, I'll be very brief, because if we want to make a motion on this, I don't want to go into all of it. This all occurred last year. It occurred last year because the previous commission, and you were on the commission, we did not expect, we based a millage rate on a number that wasn't true. And then after we based the millage rate, the highest amount on the millage rate, we were told it was a $700,000 increase, which we didn't know about. We had all this year, and last year also, Peggy, you were there, and we had these discussions. The previous vice mayor was very insistent that we should look into this, and so did Commissioner Risa. This was all discussed. It was all discussed. And I myself was of the notion we should really investigate it. We sent it to the Financial Advisory Board. I really don't know exactly what happened, but I was told that at the time, I don't know, you were there, Greg, I don't want to speak for your financial, but they didn't look into it. For whatever the reason, I don't know, you could tell us.
We did just a cursory look. What we were asked to look at is, could we do an internal fire department for roughly the same cost? And it became very apparent quickly that we couldn't get anywhere close to it. That's all we looked at.
Okay, but that was enough. So that's what the FAB said. Right now, our FAB board is in dire straits. We have 2 openings here. And I also want to say, there's 2. I said, oh, we do have 2 applicants. Oh, good. I'm very happy to hear that. I just heard that now. But I think that this might even be the purview to hire a consultant if you really want to go forward with this. I'm not so sure that volunteers on an FAB advisory board, if they were to decide at the meeting, maybe we should send this out in the future to a real consultant. But I also have a concern. I mean, we have a contract with this sanitation, and that's over $350,000. But according to what I read before, we have the right as a town. We have to take care of the good and welfare of the residents who live here. If you want to have, like what happened here, to renovate the town hall, yes, you need to have a $350,000. Glenn is agreeing with me. You have to have a referendum vote. For the good and the welfare of a community and the residents and the safety of the residents in our community, we have to try to do the very best that we know how. And I think in the future, if the FAB would like to recommend that we hire a consultant in the future to look into this, I think that's even better, because we're dealing with volunteers. They're not going to spend hours and hours of looking into these different fire departments and coming up with different numbers. That's my own opinion. Greg, would you say I'm right on that opinion?
I don't know. I spent a lot of hours
You
working
did,
on stuff.
but how many people did?
A lot of people. Honestly,
Yeah, okay.
they're a really
You
diligent
feel
group of
that
people.
they
would
would,
put a lot of time
all right, because
into
I
it.
was under the impression when we sent it to you last year, to your board, that there, people said they made the conclusion it wouldn't be worth the time to do it.
Did you not see all the hours and the meetings we had on the referendum?
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Okay.
Okay, and I asked, when you started talking, when Commissioner Gossett-Simon started talking, I think you said 8%, and that's when I wrote down to Greg, because Greg was involved in that. It was a 5% increase, it wasn't 8, I don't believe. Am I wrong?
Marshall and Matt crunched the numbers both ways.
So the
Marshall,
numbers
would you
you
like
got
the
last
answer?
night was, I took the actuals, and then there's 2 years of proposed. We haven't closed the books on this year, so we're basically still on the budget, and I took next year's proposed budget. Moving forward from the budget we just approved for next year, the 1920, moving forward, I made 2 assumptions. We're asked 5% increase each year, 8% increase in each year. And that's what it is. Based on this year's proposed numbers, if the 4.255 million we have this year, each year was to increase 5%, and each year was or 8%. Those are 2 assumptions on forecasting. Here's where the numbers would bear out over that time. No changes, no other things. Everything else under control it was a forecast of the numbers. So you take your 4.2 million, and then you say for the remaining term, it grows at 5%. Here's what your numbers look each year, growing at 5% each year. Here is it at 8%.
Okay,
That's
but I
what you
think you
have.
took the 8% number, but it's okay. You took both, okay. All right, that's what I had asked him when I sent the note. Yeah, okay, but that's what I asked him. All right, Greg is going to have to leave, so is there a motion to do anything at this point, or what?
Just for the
Well, we didn't
record,
have the opening of the...
excuse me, just for the record, Commissioner Donaldson did send an email. I will pass it out to you all so you can read it. It was in regards to item 12D, the item that is before you right now.
Okay. Do we need to have a vote on this, or everything remains the same if there's no motion, or how does this work?
Well, this was a discussion item, and unless there's someone that wants, there's no need to make a motion. If someone wants to make a motion,
You
they
can.
certainly could. I know you already made a motion in the past to send it to FAB. if you
Madam
need.
Mayor, my
Yes.
intent was to bring this forward for everyone to review and look at.
Okay.
And that I wanted to do it before October 1, in the rare event that we would agree to do something in the nature of a vote to give them a 3-year notice, which is right now our only out. If we decide not to, and we've got some great people up here, Evelyn's legal background, Greg's financial background, I don't have the answers. I am not a one-person answer machine.
Yeah.
I am trying to bring it forward so that we're not caught by surprise, because this happened to us last year with the referendum, and I will not go down that road again. And it even happened to us in a mini version with the holiday decor. So I am bringing this forward so everyone knows where we are and where we're headed by contract, and we have to look ahead 5 years, not just with this, but the waste management and other contracts. And I've asked Marshall, which I'm sure he's doing with Glenn and Matt, to let's review the big contracts and see where we are and do a 5-year projection. When I just did these numbers, I was shocked. And last year, we were told by Delray Fire, this is a one-time fix. We just have to true up. And it wasn't. It hit us again. I said, what? It was supposed to be one time last year.
Okay. Would you
So
like,
it's
I'm
here.
sorry, he has to
I
leave.
don't want to make the motion, but
Yeah,
I
you
wanted to
can make
bring
the
the
motion.
information
Okay.
out. If we don't have enough votes to put it to Delray for a severance in 3 years, I'm fine with that, but this has to be an ongoing discussion. It cannot be neglected.
Is the motion to send it to the FAB again?
I'm not making that motion because it appears I'm not going to have support for that up here, but the information at least is
We
out
don't
there.
know, without a vote, that's not
We
true.
already,
Well,
already gave the FAB,
Okay.
we already passed a motion for them to look at it. They're going to look
Okay.
at it, so we don't
Okay,
need to
so
make the motion
We have
again.
that motion and
Yeah,
the
yeah, we
outside
did that,
opinion motion.
Okay, and I didn't know we
Right.
had the two applicants. I'm very happy about that.
Yes, great, thank you.
Okay, and I will bring this out to the residents. I guess you could go, we're not voting. Okay, don't be sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure if you wanted.
Yes,
to.
ma'am. And Madam Mayor, I'm happy to provide all of this data to the chair of the board.
Thank you. Wait, yes, of course. Okay. Oh, you could go, great. You don't have to.
Doug Hillman Dalton. The FAB has only been given the assignment to review the contract, period. Do you want to expand that for the FAB to look to alternatives as well?
I think that's what, yeah, we're open
Sure.
to
That is
that.
not the current assignment.
So
Okay.
may I make a motion?
Yes, that's why I asked you to
So
make the motion.
I just came up with put my thinking cap on, and I would like to make the motion to ask the FAB, the well-qualified people, and get it staffed up, to look at a hybrid department where we have 2 trucks and we have backup from
Well,
Delray or
excuse me,
newer.
well, the FAB would look into
Wait, we can ask- right.
including
Alternatives,
multiple-
Just,
Including-
yes,
you wanna
but
do
but
many
don't
options.
limit them to the alternatives. Just say,
I'm not
we are
limiting anyone.
giving them we are asking them to look into alternatives to the contract.
I'm
and
not
just
limiting
make it
anyone.
that simple.
I'm reviewing my suggestions based on hours of research. I'm saying a hybrid department. To include a hybrid department, a standalone, self-staffed department such as Tequesta has, or continuance with Delray Beach or any other service. I'm just offering those as ideas that came forward that other municipalities have embraced in my
Understood.
research. That's it. And anything else you can find.
We understand, on behalf of the FAB.
Okay, so is that your motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second it, because I'm always happy to have them look at alternatives. It's
Yeah,
a smart
okay.
group of people.
Will you help us?
Yeah, of course.
Of course, well,
kidding.
you
I have a
have,
vested interest.
are we allowed to have a commissioner on the, involved in that? Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
I didn't hear.
Right, we have a
Right,
motion.
right. The motion is to explore alternatives, including those that were outlined by the commissioner.
And we would like Greg Bobby, the vice mayor, to be.
If they have questions for me or old material I had,
He
all that
could
stuff,
be
I'm happy to
involved.
share it all.
I'm sure everybody will help that is
Yeah,
requested.
okay. What?
I don't think that Greg, as a sitting member of the commission, is able to consult with an advisory board.
I was talking
We're
about
not
sharing
even
the
s-
information that I had from the previous
Oh,
time.
that's
Okay.
completely
Not
different.
sitting on the board, not making recommendations, but here's what we
That's-
looked at last
Yeah.
time. Please take this
That's
material
complete-
so you don't have to go find it again.
Completely different.
Okay. All right, roll call?
Commissioner Gossick Seidman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bobby,
Yes.
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Mayor Zelniker.
Yes,
Motion carries.
fine.
And for the record, Commissioner Gossick Seidman and Commissioner Bobby, when compiling, can you all provide all backup material to the clerk's office so we can get it to the board member with their agenda packet, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'll leave it
Thank you.
today. It's all
Do we need a
organized.
motion to say that we're not canceling the contract, or no? Okay,
No, I didn't make that motion.
okay.
You can't comment.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. I think we're good. Thank you, Greg. Thanks. And I see the stock market went up, huh? Nice one is on his computer. That's always good. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we're up to E, thank you. Approval of the minutes, August 1st, 2019, special minutes, September 5th, 2019, special first public hearing budget minutes. Are there any changes to the August 1st special minutes and September 5th special first public hearing budget minutes? Are there any changes?
No, I have no changes, but can we vote on this with only 3 people present?
Sure, you have a quorum present, you just can't vote on ordinances or certain expenditures.
Okay.
For charter.
Okay, so we can vote, okay. Okay, we have Commissioner Seidman, please. Do you have any problems with the minutes?
No, ma'am, there were a few typos, but they were minor. It's
Okay.
fine.
I don't have a problem either.
No.
And at this time, if anyone had public comments on the minutes, you can speak. And if not, we will do a roll call.
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
I second.
Roll call?
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Commissioner Gossick Seidman,
Yes.
and Mayor Zellniker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Public comments and requests. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak on agenda items only. Please come to the platform, clearly speak into the microphone, state your first and last name and address for the record. Okay, does anyone have any comments? Dr. Greenwald, thank you.
Rick Greenwald, Tranquility Drive. I was going to spend my whole time kind of, again, talking a little bit about governance, but first by commending you on some of the meetings, how the budget was handled in previous meetings. I think in general, when you get some people from the audience and also on the commission saying, gee, I think we should have raised taxes more, and other people saying not at all, but dip into the reserves, and you come to something in between and it's collegial and you get there with a good discussion, that's a favorable thing and it's nice to see. A couple of things today. I think that it would be good if everybody remembers that we have a town manager form of government. And I think for some of the issues that were presented, such as the building department fees and permitting fees and so on, when you're going to have an action item, it's helpful if Marshall presents it, tells you what he's in favor of or not in favor of, and then has Jeff Massey here to help present some of that material and answer questions so that that can be done and you can finish in one meeting rather than sending it back, because I think that with some of that might have been clarified at the time. Similarly with holiday lights, I know some people feel strongly about, sizes of dreidels, menorahs, and other items. I think, again, it's the best use of the commission's time if most of this comes from the town manager and his staff. Basically, for approval, it's best if the commission does not spend a lot of their time counting ornaments and lights, basically. I think that the commission is best served, and the town is best served when the commission devotes most of its energies to major strategies and fiduciary responsibility and not on what are really, in the big picture, fairly minor tactical items. And then finally, in my little remaining time, I think we got off the rails a little bit today with the fire department discussions. I think a lot of this has been covered before in the meetings that I've attended. It's been given to the Financial Advisory Board to look at. I think that that's appropriate. Everybody agrees that Delray provides a good service. Everybody agrees that it's mandatory that we provide an excellent EMS service. I think that the problems relate to the actual contract and the costs, and I find it personally disturbing when we're paying more than twice as much per resident as surrounding communities. I think it is fair to give Delray some sort of a premium for providing the service, but
That's all right, continue.
a premium of 225% or something like that seems a little bit outlandish to me, and therefore I think that if the FAB can develop a program for potential renegotiation, I think that that would be a worthwhile thing to do, but I think that some of the preliminary discussion should probably take place with Delray before we actually give them formal warning regarding any our 3-year out, before invoking any of our 3-year out provisions. But I do think that, and this has all been talked about before, none of this is new, that it is a big part of our present and future budgets, and therefore is worth re-exploring. So thank you for your time.
We thank you. Anyone else? Any comments? No? Okay, so now we're going to go to Town Commission reports. Commissioner David?
No.
Commissioner Donaldson? Oh, I'm sorry. It says in my script. I'm sorry. Commissioner Peggy Acid-Seidman?
Yes, thank you. I just want to repeat that I appreciate my fellow commission members and the attorney and Mr. Labady's help in looking at this fire contract. I just will not be a seated commissioner and let something pass by, such as the referendum, and not try to catch it when we need to look forward and not backward where we're going with our town, as Commissioner David has said many times, and wanted to give the slim opportunity, if we wish to do a 3-year out, to provide that, because we don't have another meeting after today that would have allowed that decision to be presented to Delray. So that is my point in bringing it up here, and my point in bringing the actual numbers, which have not been crunched and provided to the commission and public before this week. So I thank everyone for their time. I certainly do not mean to be redundant, but I think it was I wish I would have had this opportunity on December 18th last year. Could have stopped that referendum. Thank you.
Okay. This had nothing to do with the referendum, but okay. All right. Okay. I really didn't have much to say other than the fact to remind everybody in the community. I keep on reading the flu is going to be very bad this year. A lot of the snowbirds are coming back with all their flu. So please take your flu shot, listen to your doctor, and get the advice from your doctor. But I do understand it's going to be a bad flu year. And other than that, Lashana Tova to all the residents who celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and that means healthy, happy New Year to all. And that's all that I have to report. Thank you. And Glenn, you're next, but I think you spoke already. Thank you.
I have more than enough.
Okay. And our town manager will give his report, and I do agree with what Dr. Greenwald said. We have a town manager, and we all passed a resolution that we're supposed to go through the town manager. And some of the items that we're discussing really should be done by the town manager, and he can give reports to us instead of us going out and doing research and getting different information. But I just wanted to remind all of us that we do have a very good town manager, and we should be going to him, and he should maybe be giving some of these reports to us. That's my only comment. Thank you. And our town manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Thursday, Friday, the 3800 block of Ocean Walk, they're going to be doing that repaving project, so just be cognizant that there'll be some delays. Most of the heavy lifting will be on Thursday, but it's a mill and repave to get the road looking better than a patch. So that is scheduled to go. Crosswalks, yes. Flags, there seems to be an interest to expand the flag use. I have a little bit of concern that we should probably reach out to FDOT before we dump all these flags at every single crosswalk. I think we're going to try to do that informally with the field crew first before we start dropping all of the PVC pipes and all these flags everywhere. I want to make sure they're comfortable with our frangible development that we'll put in there and kind of keep it out away from the road. But there are some crosswalks that are a little bit peculiar. They have a little bit of unique placement where we would put the flag. So we want to probably reach out to effed out a little bit because with the pilot program at Boca Highlands, it's kind of away from the right-of-way. It's kind of unseen. But other places it may encroach the road, and we want to do our best to maintain some relationship with them. But we're moving forward. We're going to start having those conversations over the next probably week or so. Pat's going to bring them in, and we're going to walk through it. The permit, we have preliminary approval for the complete project and enhancements of the crosswalks. They are actively now building the bid documents. Also, as we talked about last time, we have put in a direct appropriation request for that. Thank you. So we've got those going to see if we can't conjure up some additional dollars to help support it. My gut at this point in time is that, again, with the engineer's estimates, with contingencies, we'll be over the 350. But I'd like to take a run at bidding it out, as we are required to do, to see what those true prices are and see how far off or over we are, and see if there are other creative solutions, or at least have a harder number to present back to hopefully our legislator to give us money. If not, we know we're going to have to find money through partnerships or in the future. But we're working through that. We're going to hit the streets with the bid and just see what the market tests out. You know, maybe the engineer's off basing the cost. This isn't a very common type project, so there may be a contractor that's a little more eager to do some work and get some better pricing. Cost estimate was around 400. So that number is 50 over our 350 threshold. But again, those are some guesses, and preliminary, the engineer is saying it's about $24,000 per crossing to put in those embedded lights. Seems a little bit high to me, so I think they're being very cautious, but let's go out and test the water, see what's in there. We'll put the in-ground lighting as a bid alt, so basically we can take it out or in based on the cost, so at least we can get the other part of that project done pretty quickly. Because if you're not in the road putting those embedded lights, putting the signs and stuff in, that'll go quick. That's probably a couple, 3-week project to do the rest of it. So we're moving along. We're in good shape on those projects. On a side note, the American Flood Coalition, we passed Resolution 18-006R to participate actively in this group. There is a conference coming up that is a mayors-only conference. So mayors can attend. All cost of attendance will be reimbursed by the organization. I'm saying this, Mayor Zelniker is willing to attend. There's zero cost to the township. We've passed a resolution to become a member of this organization to bring information back. She can't make commitments. She understands she can't make commitments on behalf, but she can go gather the information, bring it back, and it's a great opportunity for a zero cost attendance, so that's great. And hopefully she'll be attending with those details. So that's good news. It's a free conference to participate in this organization. That's great news. Other than that, I don't really have anything. Just kind of making that transition to year-end closeout. I have reached out and having conversations. I know regarding the fire with the city manager. So we are moving in that direction to just discuss and answer questions that I have, so I can clearly respond to you on questions. So that has started. So we'll take a very cautious, safe approach. Let the FAB do their stuff as looking at those alternatives. But I have discussed this with the city manager, so we're working through helping me explain certain provisions that are in there in the budget, so everybody knows. Because folks are going to ask that question, especially the FAB. Knowing the FAB, they're going to ask me a lot of questions, so I better have some answers. So we're going to go start there, and then we'll work our way out. That's it.
Very much. I just wanted, did you want the commissioners to discuss it, if I go on that trip, that's okay?
As I read the resolution, it says our active participation. I just said out loud, reminding you can't commit us to anything. You have to bring everything back to vote.
Okay, it's all right with my commissioners.
But we have a resolutions to actively participate. You would be our active participant. It's full cost coverage, so there isn't a budget item we have to be careful of, so we're good.
Okay. Well,
Where
thank
and
you.
when is that? again?
It's coming up in, sorry, I just,
It is
October 20th.
October
Curious.
21st through the 22nd in Washington DC.
and they're paying
cool.
all of her travel costs,
Wow.
hotel, meals.
No,
So it's
Rhoda's a
fully
very,
covered.
she's a very good people person, and I think it's terrific. She can go and come back with any information to help us. I think
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Thank you very
Series of
much.
special projects for me, I'm sure.
Thank you. Okay. All right, hearing any more conversations before we close, I will need a motion
I
To-
move we adjourn.
that we adjourn.
I guess I'll
at,
second. I'm the only other-
3:59.
I'm the only
At-
other person here to
Right,
second.
at
so I second.
3:59 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.